Happy New Year to everyone who is tuning in for our sit together today. We're only a few days in, of course, to this new year of 2023, and I find myself marking another anniversary or beginning or marking of the beginning of a beginning. Coming up on the third anniversary, I'm going back to January 5th, 2020, of the Daf Yomi cycle, the tradition of studying a page, or actually two pages, because a page of Talmud is both the front and the back. So studying a daf of Talmud each day as part of an international cycle, and people all over the world who started this really truly a spiritual practice of study 3 years ago tomorrow. So I want to share today one of the pearls that I came across in my study recently. We are currently in Masechet Nedarim, a section of the Talmud that deals with the idea of vows, what it means to make a vow, to keep a vow, what are the parameters of vows. And so I want to share this teaching to ground our practice today that is taken from there. So one framing question to consider before Kat shares the text in a few minutes is, why do we do the things we do? And this is a good time for us, always a good time to think about that question. But as many of us or people around us are acting on their New Year's resolutions, it's a great time for us to just reflect in general on what motivates us in our lives. So the Talmudic teaching opens with a verse taken from the section of the Torah that is traditionally read a few weeks before the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah. So the verse that we're going to look at today at the beginning of this teaching comes right after a verse that many of us are familiar with, where it says, Uvacharta b'chaim, choose life. Choose life is what the Torah says to us. And so the verse that comes right after this may be seen as an answer to that question, the question of how do I choose life? So thanks to Kat for putting up the text. And if you can't see this, don't worry, because I'll be reading everything out loud and kind of commenting, expanding it as we go. So the Talmud opens this section. It says, it is taught. And it starts with a quote, as I said, from the book of Deuteronomy, this last book of the Torah. To love Adonai, to listen to the Holy One's voice, and to cleave to the divine. So this is this idea of like, how do we choose life? We choose life by doing these three things. Lest, the Talmud continues, lest a person say to themselves, I will read the Torah, so they will call me a sage. I will study rabbinic literature, so they call me a rabbi. I will study so that I'm an elder sitting in the academy. So this verse from the book of Deuteronomy is meant to be a cautionary advice for us to help us be on guard against the lures of the ego, I guess I would say. So when I was reading this and studying this past week, it reminded me of an experience that I had in my life a number of decades ago, where I was trained as to be a professional singer. And so I had, gone and have degrees in music, and I had finished those degrees and was studying with a private teacher after I left the university and finished, and was, working professionally and doing other things and trying to build a career as a musician. And so I went to her and I said, I really want to do vocal competitions. What I really want to do is enter these vocal competitions and excel. And it really motivates me to do that right now. And she kept saying to me over and over again, that's not the goal. I don't, it's fine that you want to do these competitions, but let's focus on singing, like on what you're doing here and what you love doing. And when you have kind of amassed enough repertoire, as we say, then we can kind of look at that. But don't start out with that as your goal, right? So I was thinking about that example from my own life, vis-a-vis this teaching from the Talmud, right? That I was coming into this like thinking, well, I want to be the person who wins the competition, not the love of singing is eventually going to unfold in some kind of unknown outcome, right? So I learned that lesson, earlier. Haven't learned it completely, right? Because I'm human, but I thought of this and I kind of connected it back to this Talmud teaching. So the Talmud continues, it tells us what not to do, but then it also gives us an alternative. Rather, learn out of love. As the verse states, right? Goes back to what we said. It starts out saying, love Adonai. That's the primary thing. Love what you're doing. Love God. Don't think about these outcomes or be so goal-oriented that you miss out on the essential essence of being present. Then the Talmud continues, the honor or whatever outcome will eventually come of its own accord. And then it introduces this beautiful verse from the book of Proverbs, taken from the 3rd section of the Jewish Bible. And I want to unpack this with you a little bit as grounds for our practice. Bind them, bind the mitzvot. We're going to translate that in a moment. Leave that untranslated for right now. Bind the mitzvot upon your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. I just love this image. Even for those of us who don't yet know what mitzvot are or feel uncomfortable with what mitzvot are, I love the idea of this, that my heart has a tablet and that I'm going to be able to write things on them that are precious to me, important and motivating for me. So let's go back to mitzvot, which I left untranslated here. So as is frequently my custom, and I've done here in the IGS meditation, instead of translating it verbatim or in a literal way, I want to translate it through a teaching from one of my rabbis, Bradley Shavit Artson, who guides us in how we might think about what mitzvot are. Traditionally translated, mitzvot mean commandments, right? So it would be, if we were reading the Proverbs verse literally, bind the commandments upon your fingers, like the things you have to do, the things you should do, right? But I want to think about mitzvot and read it back into our text in a different way, thinking about mitzvot as a divine lure or an invitation, divine invitation. So Rabbi Artson teaches on the concept of mitzvah, which is singular for commandment, and mitzvot is plural for commandments. He states, God does not exercise coercive power. God works through persuasion and invitation, through persistently inviting us to make the best possible choice, and then leaving us free to make the wrong choice. Let that sink in a little bit, right? God invites us to make the best possible choice and then leaves us free to make the wrong choice. But the instant we have made our choice, God persistently lures us toward making the best possible subsequent choice. In Rabbi Artson's mind, mitzvot are really a series of choices and decisions that we have the power to make. And they can be somewhat linked, right? So that there isn't this idea of a God being a commander and coercing us into doing anything, but rather it's like a table being set of divine invitations that we're invited to accept or make choices, around things that have variables. If you want to read more about Rabbi Artson's, what is known as process theology, if you just click on his name in the link in the screen share, you should be able to get to a website that has the source of this quote, and you can read more. So if we want to read this back into the Proverbs verse, we could read it or think about it this way. Bind the invitations of the divine, the mitzvot, on your fingers. Write them on the tablets of your heart. So by focusing on the mitzvot, the divine invitations themselves, and not their possible outcomes, right? Not where I'm going to get to as a result or want to get to as a result of doing these things, we end up living and learning out of love, out of the present moment, instead of the striving for the future. I think Emily, who led meditation for us yesterday, talked about this, like releasing the striving and just being in the place of love of the moment, love of what you're doing. And I don't mean love, again, in the things are always great kind of, and I love what I'm doing thing, but like that you're in it and present through it. And that's really important. So for me, meditating is a way of figuratively binding the divine on our fingers. So meditation is embodied. It's there's an awareness of what's going on with us physically. It's not just happening up here. So, and for some of us, this verse from Proverbs may evoke the tradition of laying to fill in the prayer boxes with straps that wind around our fingers in the morning, reminding us that our bodies act in the world and our hearts and bodies are intertwined. So when we sit in meditation, we invite the divine into our bodies so that our heart might be transformed, so that what is written or imprinted on the heart comes to shape our actions throughout the day. And this act of sitting that we're going to engage in comes from love and presence, not from where it will get us. We're always reminded of that teaching that the goal of meditating is not to be a good meditator, or in my case, to win a competition, right? The goal of singing is not to win a competition. The goal of my study is not to be an elder in the academy, but to learn from love, to bind with intent, and to discover the tablet of my heart so that I may move through the world in sync with the divine. The Torah itself is the source of the divine invitations, the mitzvot. So it's no surprise that the rabbis link the first verse from Proverbs with some of the most vibrant imagery of Torah found elsewhere in the book of Proverbs. So the Talmud continues by bringing us another verse from Proverbs. The Torah's ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. And it is a tree of life to those who grasp it. Happy is everyone who holds it fast. Consequently, the one who learns Torah for its own sake, as reflected in the verse, bind them upon your fingers, will eventually merit pleasantness, peace, and happiness. So just as the Torah is this opportunity to cleave to learning, so too our meditation is an opportunity to cleave to the tablets of our hearts and to attend to our bodies. So as we reconnect with our breath and our bodies in this moment, we turn to quiet. We may want to place our hands on our hearts in place of that tablet of our hearts in the words of Proverbs, if that is accessible to you. And we might want to reflect on what are the words that we want to carry with us in our hearts from this sit as we return into our daily routines. What are the words that we need to have on our hearts? And what are the words that the world needs? We will sit together, and a few moments before we turn to the Mourner's Kaddish prayer, I'll bring us back together with singing a melody of Eitz Chaim. It is a tree of life, taken from the last verses in the book of Proverbs that we just read. If the Hebrew words are unfamiliar to you, please look into the chat and I'll paste in the transliterated Hebrew so that you can sing along if you'd like. Eitz Chaim Ki Lemachzikim Ba V'tomchea Meushar Derachea Dachenoam V'chonetivotecha Shalom. Ilai, 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 ilai,
Thank you so much, Susan, as always, for the beautiful teaching and this really beautiful practice today. Friends, we seal it as we do every day by creating a minyan of comfort and support for those in mourning, or if you're observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to participate in Kaddish, you can put the name or names of anyone you're honoring today in the chat box now or after we recite Kaddish. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, please stay present for those who are and offer your love and support as they move through their own process of grieving. Thanks to Kat for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. And if you're joining me, please do so by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute yourself now. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shem Yamad, Vayichon, V'Yamechon, V'Chaye D'chol Beit Yisrael, Agala, Bizman Kariv, Yehi Shmei Rabba Nevarach, Olam V'Lamei Almaya, Barach, Yishtabach, V'Yidbar, V'Yitramam, V'Yitzeh, Tadar, V'Yitaleh, V'Yitkusha, B'Yichud, Ela Min Kol Birchata, V'Shurata, B'Chata, V'Nechemata, V'Yiram Ba'alma, V'Yiru, V'Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chaim, Yisrael, V'Yiru, Amen. V'Ket Halam Yomav, V'Yaseh Shalom, V'Yinu, Kol Yoshvei Yisrael. And friends, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank again our teachers, Rabbi Susan Leider, for leading us so beautifully once more. Thanks to Kat Esposito for holding our space with skill so beautifully again, as always. And most of all, thanks to each and every one of you for showing up and for your devotion to your practice and to this community of practice. We're all grateful for each other and for the opportunity to engage in practice together. Unfortunately, Rabbi Susan Leider can't stay on to join us for our conversation after the practice, but I will hold some space for a little bit of time for those who would like to stay on. And you can feel free, as always, to use the chat function just to share your reflections. And if there's a question that has come up for you, I'll try to respond for myself and not for Susan, of course, but very happy to stay on and hold the space. And for those of you who would like to just continue to sit together as we're on together, of course, you're always welcome to do that. So I see there's a question. Laura, is asking to speak a bit about how to learn from love during challenging times, during times you don't love. I think Susan was kind of alluding to, I mean, maybe she spoke to that directly, that she was, I think, using a little hazardous to say what she was saying. So my understanding about what Susan was saying was that she was certainly not using love in the conventional English sense of approving of something, but of rather of being flush with the experience, not disconnected, not separated from, but acknowledging the truth of something. So that can encompass even things that are in the category of unpleasant. You may recall this, a few weeks ago, we basically went through a week of practice with Rabbi Ari Lev Fornari on quote unquote difficult emotions, dealing with that which we experience as unpleasant or worse than unpleasant. And my understanding of Susan's teaching today in a nutshell was that it was an invitation to move through the shell of the ego and the self, which is establishing these judgments about this is to my liking, this is not into my liking. In the passage of the Talmud she was quoting had to do with kind of honor seeking, right? The ego's desire for affirmation, and to acknowledge that as part of being a human being, and to move through that to a state of awareness which is deeper than or transcends the ego, where we are really engaging in what in Jewish mysticism is known as dveikut, which really refers to the idea of cleaving to the divine. And we can understand that regardless of your religious or spiritual language, as being flush with one's experience, not distanced from, not detached from, but really kind of, to use the vernacular, kind of in the flow of life, as opposed to struggling with the flow of life. So, and that's I think how Susan was describing coming at trying to follow that flow, which Rabbi Artson also describes as kind of a flow that acts also as a lure or as a prod or as a flow that is actually trying to steer us in a particular direction, and that we make choices all the time, moment to moment, to go with that flow or to resist that flow. And that when we make a choice that is in opposition to that flow of life, that it reminds us to kind of correct our course. At least that's my take on it. Let's see if there are other questions. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. Oh, thank you, Harris, for putting, wow. Quoting Rabbi Alan Liu of blessed memory, joy is the deep release of the soul and includes death and pain. Joy is any feeling fully felt, any experience we give our whole being to. I think that's kind of, I think that's very much in line, I think, with what Susan was inviting us to today, which is this release from the self into the water that we can flow with. Yeah, thanks also, Cheryl, for pointing out that connection of binding the mitzvot on our fingers and writing on the tablets of the heart. It's just a really nice way of framing and understanding some of our traditional Jewish practices, such as putting on tefillin and winding the tefillin of the shel yad of the arm around the finger, and also about understanding our inner life as tablets that we're allowing them to be written on. And I'll just tack on to that, of course, the Jewish tradition, the rabbinic tradition, that both the broken tablets that Moses shattered when he witnessed the golden calf, and the intact tablets that were written subsequent to that were both carried in the ark as the Israelites made their way through the wilderness. And there's a beautiful teaching that both the broken and the whole tablets are present within us as well. We can honor that. Okay. And Julie, thank you so much. Also, to cleave to the divine might be thought of as bringing chesed to the truth of every moment. It's really kind of the practice in a beautiful nutshell. Thank you for that. Okay, Ricky, could you offer an example in a time of interpersonal conflict, how one might channel and invite this wisdom of being present with the sadness of the conflict and find a way out? I'm not going to pretend to offer any definitive wisdom on that. Will say that for me, and I think what this practice is inviting us to do is to honor that sadness, really honor and accept all the emotions that are stimulated by the conflict: anger, fear, pain, resentment, grief, for ourselves, and that there is no way, quote, out of it until we do that for ourselves, and to some, I guess, as well for the other. So that being present with the sadness of the conflict is the portal to finding a way out of the conflict, which is not to say the conflict is easily resolvable or is meant to be resolved. It may just stand. So, okay, friends, let's just see. Being present with the sadness of the conflict. Thanks, Lisa. Beautiful comments as always in the chat. Really appreciate always the reflections that you all share in the chat after our sit together, and also appreciate the ability and the time to just let it all metabolize a little bit as we sit together after we sit in meditation. So thank you all again. Thanks to Kat for holding our space. Tomorrow will be led in practice by Rabbi Devorah Lynn, who's one of our regular participants in this community of practice. And I will not be with us live tomorrow. My colleague Firkins Reed will be hosting tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday, and Rebecca Schisler will be leading us to sit into Shabbat together to close out the book of Genesis on this Shabbat. So I'll look forward to seeing you on Friday, and thank you all for the opportunity to practice together.